Trying to get back, but a crew run and I'll be giving it my bestest and nothing can stop me except divine intervention. I'm willing it to in my home. Da, 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 da. Today, I am going to be engaging on the topic of whether my use of Claude makes me think more or less. Basically, am I using Claude in a way that makes me stupider, or is it actually kind of expanding my thoughts? This is something that I am excited to get into, and I'm going to go over kind of three uses or three setups that I'm using that I think are actually helping me ground my thought processes and my usage to be more engaged, more thoughtful, more of value to me. And so I think the reason why I've landed on this is over the last year and a bit, I've been part of an AI startup. And then prior to that, I've been kind of playing and exploring different AI tools for quite some time. And I think sometimes you can get caught up in being curious and optimistic and kind of running with things. And I kind of gave myself permission in the last week to take a bit of a step back and to start thinking a little bit more about, well, what is my position on certain things? And how do I feel about the discourse that's happening around kind of trust and what it's doing to us as people and the kind of social fabric that, the new technology kind of alters and changes, and what does it do to my relationships and how I engage and how I also think. And in some of my readings and research, what I came across was this idea that the biggest failure would be not to have like proper public discourse about these kind of things. And so I thought a good place for me to start with engaging on that is whether my use of Claude, makes me think more or think less. There was an MIT study, I think it was MIT, that came out not too long ago. And it basically did a bit of a test where it had people kind of working on something just with no tools available to them, no AI, no whatever, and then later gave them access to, I think, ChatGPT, and then another group who had ChatGPT from the beginning. And I think the outcome of that was essentially, if you're already engaged mentally, if you've already stimulated your brain into a task, then adding on or using a tool like Claude can kind of expand and extend and increase brain stimulation and activity. Versus if you start from the get-go with that tool, that sometimes that can almost cause a kind of a bit of a like you're going nowhere. There's not as much kind of stimulation happening. Now, I'm sure you can probably give arguments for and against those kind of things. And I haven't done a deep dive into that study for myself. I will try and find the link and kind of add it somewhere if you're interested. But subjectively, I find that actually really is reminiscent of my experience, in the sense that when I approach my day and I'm using a tool like Claude, and I am kind of in this autopilot mode where I'm kind of going to Claude and I'm going, here, like, go and do this thing, or like think about this topic. Go and fix this for me. I don't really want to have to deal. I'm just kind of dumping it on Claude and expecting it to go and figure it out. Oftentimes, I end up getting either frustrated with the output and that it's not quite what I want, or I like start layering on like it should be better and it should do this and we should think about this. And meanwhile, like I haven't really meaningfully engaged with the thing in the first place. And so I've like outsourced that thinking towards Claude. And usually then I feel irritated because I feel like I've wasted my time. And there's nothing that bothers me more than wasting my time, I think. And so I wanted to share three ways that I think I'm kind of using, or things that I'm doing that I think help me kind of ground things in my own active engagement cognitively, so that then when I'm kind of adding into Claude, I feel like there's this solid foundation already at the get-go. And what I'm going to try and do is, for some of them, I'm going to try and open up the kind of a look under the hood of how I've actually set this up, so that you get a bit of an idea on that as well. So of the three, the first one that I wanted to highlight, which is not like by any means, that amazing or that new, but it's the idea of having like whiteboard sessions. And with this, this was like one of the first purchases I think I made when I started thinking about this project, because there's nothing that gets me going more than like writing and mapping out an idea or a thought or whatever, and like seeing it kind of come to life visually. It's kind of giving, tell me you're in your 30s without telling me you're in your 30s or like over 30. I feel like younger generations, I don't know, but like I think they're more used to like typing notes and using their computers and like whatever else. I love a pen and paper. I love a board and a marker. So if you are under 30 and you're like mad about this as well, like maybe let us know. But there's something to this. And so this is one of my first purchases. Now I'm working through a challenge that I've had, which is like how to kind of position my voice when I'm talking to myself, and how I want to come across, and like how I want to position that. But from everything from the initial ideas of this project to then my goals, to the stack that I want, to my budgets, to whatever, being able to go and just like draw things out, map things out, look at things visually, engage with it in that way, I think definitely stimulates something for me, where I feel then like it gets me into this flow, it gets this momentum. And then I go and take a picture of it and I share that with Claude, and we kind of use that as a bit of kind of a momentum piece. But it helps me get clear on what it is that I'm trying to do before then I go ahead and kind of start getting into things. And also like there's nothing, it gets my gears going. Another one that I wanted to share was how much and how actively I am using like voice dumps almost. And so a lot of the initial kind of spark for most of the things that I work on, whether it's an idea for an episode, whether it's an idea for a structural thing within kind of this project that I'm working on behind the scenes, whatever it is, it typically will start with like a voice dump for me. So if I move over here, you should be able to have a little bit of a look at how this is working for me at the moment. So I use something called Granola. That is a voice transcription tool that is an app that you can get on your phone. It also functions on your laptop or desktop. I basically talk at it and it transcribes kind of what I'm saying, and it does so very, very well. I was at the beach the other day in like pretty high winds with my Jabra in ear, earphones and speaker, and it still did an amazing job at capturing everything that I was thinking about. I trigger this whole flow. So I go into Granola and press like, let's go. Then it captures what I'm saying and transcribes it. And then I bring it into Claude, or I say to Claude via the connector I've already enabled. I just open a new chat with Claude and I say, hey, I've just chatted with Granola, pull the latest transcript. And you can have it take the summary notes. So Granola gives like a summary of what you've discussed. Or it will take your raw transcript. I always give it the raw transcript because I want it to learn and understand how I speak and use my words. And then once we've kind of worked through it and we've kind of figured out, okay, what is it that I'm talking about? What would this relate to? Is this to do with one of the tasks that was on the list for this week? Is this something else? Then I decide, okay, go ahead and log this into Notion. Again, Claude has access to my Notion database. It has full kind of access as much as it can. So it can go and actually log all of that information for me, so that we've started from really what's in my brain and it allows for a very large amount of context, because when you're speaking, I don't know about you, but I have a lot to say usually. And then it kind of, I capture where an idea has come from, what I'm worried about, what I'm thinking about, what's bothering me, what I'm excited for. And it has all of that access then, so that where we land is usually a lot closer to what feels like me, basically. Um, and also then there is like dictation, and there is a way you can kind of have a discussion with Claude, but usually it's not that reliable. Dictation gets a little bit like, yeah, I find it gets a little jittery after a couple of minutes. The conversational chat, you know what? I don't need to be interrupted. I want to just talk. That's the way I learn, is by talking things out or writing things out, and then I figure out what I mean. So sometimes I'm saying things just to figure out if I actually think that's the case, and this allows me to do that really, really well. And then usually it will log in terms of like not so much these perfect little categories, but it's like, is this a thread of thinking? Is this kind of a textural thing about what it is I'm thinking? Or is this kind of a spark of an idea that I might want to pick up later on? So this is kind of another way that I think really, really helps me feel quite kind of centered in the work that I'm doing, and that it really is also learning and understanding how my mind works and the way I really speak, so that we're also using that to personalize Claude and the approach to what's actually going to work for me, which then feels just like something I can be a lot more engaged with, because it feels like me, which is really important for me as well. The last thing that I wanted to chat about is starting with kind of function. Now, just give me a second, bear with me to kind of explain what I mean. There is a real temptation when you haven't done something before, or you don't have an established process of something, that when you have access to something like Claude, which feels like it has this like infinite capability to do things, it can be really easy to fall into a hole of like over optimizing something to create this perfect thing that in reality you haven't even done once. Like sometimes you're setting something up, you've created a tool or an app, or you have a flow that you want to set up, and like you're spending hours going back and forth with Claude building something, and you haven't even tried it once. Like you haven't successfully done anything yet. You haven't shipped, you haven't executed, it hasn't gone out into the world. And if there's one thing I've learned from being in the startup space, having a target that you have to ship to or execute for really keeps you on your toes with momentum forwards. Spending a ton of time and hours trying to optimize something you've not actually done in reality can be such an enormous waste of time, and you usually don't know until after the fact. So when I say start with function, what I mean is build up something that works first. Now, I know there's all this idea of like in the startup world, it's like this minimum viable product and we'll do this, but like, great, you can put a fancy word next to it. But what you really just want to do is like do the first version of what you're trying to attempt. And no, it's not going to be perfect, but you learn way more from understanding how the flows go than you do from trying to make it perfect in the get-go, like from the get-go and from the jump. So if I base that in an example of my workflows at the moment, one of the things that's really time consuming when you're creating video is trying to cut down versions of that video for shorter clips that then can be consumed as things like Instagram Reels or TikToks or YouTube Shorts, these kind of things. And oftentimes that is how people engage with you, how people find you, how people are reminded that you have kind of something coming. And so that can take a ton of time to do manually. And so if I just show a little bit of like what this process looked like for me initially, a full like manual flow of doing this myself involves kind of things like going and recording a big video in OBS. This is kind of the software that I use to actually record. Then having to re-watch that same video and make notes and kind of mark in and outs when I want to actually have these clips. That's usually in DaVinci Resolve for me. Then I'm cutting those clips up, I'm reframing them, I'm putting them in the right kind of vertical or crop. I then go and add subtitles, and then I need to add thumbnails. And it's like this whole exhaustive kind of setup that in the end gets me a lot of kind of control over things, but oftentimes ends up costing me like quite a lot of time and effort that really doesn't add a lot to me, in the sense of a lot of it is manual stuff that I would love to just not have to do, because the thought and the effort and the time has already taken place in the video. It's just, this is like the ways to make sure that it can kind of get out there and be seen. And so what I did then as a next step was, okay, I've done it fully manually myself and I understand how that process goes, and it's painful. So what if I just used an existing platform that aims to do what I'm trying to do quite well? And so I started using Opus Clip, and that's where you basically can upload your files and then it will auto pick clips for me, review and tweak them, and then I can download with kind of subtitles already kind of burnt into the video. So this gives me like a lot less work and hassle that I have to do, but it's kind of more focused on what it thinks will be kind of viral or the most kind of impactful pieces. You can't do certain things and it costs money. And if you're on a tight budget, spending money on something that has a monthly cost on top of kind of a number of other things you're maybe exploring or using or making use of, it adds up really, really fast. And so having kind of gone through where I'm so actively engaged in doing this manually, then I've kind of delegated a portion off. So it's kind of given me back some time. I've looked at the output and I figured out what's actually going on and allowed myself to do a bit of an analysis of how useful this is. Then I can land on what I'm doing right now, which is essentially we are now building like a custom flow for this. What this means is I've kind of taken the learnings from the manual setup and from delegating, and now I'm actually going and building something out with Claude where I have a very clear idea of what it is that I need it to do and what it is that I want it to do it within, in terms of like costs and times and that kind of thing. So in this version, we're now in a place where I'm using Claude Code, and we're setting up things to go and actually have a process in place where I'll get kind of cut downs made for me. I get proposals that I can review and kind of edit and nudge differently if I want to. It then will go and build those clips for me and give me thumbnails to choose from. And it kind of does that at a fraction of the cost, at least kind of per episode, but just in general of what it would cost versus using kind of this platform. And so what I'm hoping to kind of describe here, and I'll go into more details about some of these flows in another video, but what I'm hoping to kind of detail out here is that by using these different they're almost like scaffolding for me that I didn't even really recognize it until I started thinking about it this week. But I think that's what makes me feel best when I'm showing up to work right now, which is working on this project. I sit down at my laptop at my desk, and when I'm spending time using Claude in a way that like I'm already engaged with it, I've already been mapping out what I'm interested in or thinking about or working through. And then I'm pulling on Claude not only to get me more efficiency and to kind of delegate some of the boring stuff that I don't want to do, but it's actually helping me to extend my capabilities beyond what would be possible, going and doing some research on those things, going and kind of helping and building up a picture of who I am and what this project is and my vision. Then I feel like enthusiastic and like in it and engaged, and I'm like excited for this, for life, for everything. versus the kind of more showing up, kind of throwing things at it and hoping for the best. I want to quite intentionally select and choose how to use it. And I think I'm aiming towards meaningfully engaging my brain in what I'm doing so that I'm actively then and intentionally using Claude to kind of supplement versus replace. So, all in all, I don't think I can resolve the question. I don't know if it's helping me to think more. And in some cases, if you're an overthinker, thinking more is not always the win. It's not always the option. But I think what we're trying, or what I'm trying to kind of point out here, is I think if you're using anything with intention, it can really change how you also feel about it. And so if you recognize any of this where sometimes you're having a bit of that frustration, or you feel like you're not getting as much out of it, or it's kind of replacing some of your judgment or thinking. Maybe this can be like a permission towards you to say, hey, you get to put in place like a whiteboard. You get to put in place like these things that help you to feel however you work best and engage with. Use that, use the way you learn to kind of cement and foundationally set up your work, so that then when you are using something like Claude, it's adding to you and expanding your abilities, versus replacing. And I think that's all I wanted to say.